Alright people, we've seen the RTR Lite here for quite a little bit, and we've done a few mods here and there, but now it's time for the big stuff, the meat of the mods, the make or break moment, and what might even be considered sacrilege. Electro & Co does not want you to see this because we're putting a Fardriver in it. Okay, I'm actually going to interrupt myself before the video even starts. As I'm filming this, today it is Saturday, October 18th, and everything that you're going to see after this was filmed over a month ago in early September. And as I'm sure you also know today, Electro & Co has dropped their brand new TrueMoto 6+7 mod kit. So that's what I get for sticking to a schedule. I'll see you later when I interrupt myself again. And this should be a first too, because I've watched just about every video there is on this platform about this bike, and I haven't seen anyone do it yet, unless Pat Outdoors beat me to it. So we'll probably be the first ones out there to see exactly how much performance we can add to this thing for 1/6 the cost of the alternative. So there's a couple things to consider in the feasibility of this, that being where I can mount the Fardriver and, probably more importantly, will it even run? Let's start with that second one because I think it's more important to actually know whether or not it's going to run before I go into all the effort of mounting the thing. So I'm going to start with tearing down the bike a little bit. We need to get to all the bike's connections, so I think I'll remove the battery, take off the left shroud, and take off the left body plastic that covers the battery. So now we can see where everything lies. As you can see, the stock controller is actually behind this plastic panel here. It comes off pretty easily. It's just snapped in, and then you just bend it downward and you can pull it out fully to remove it. Now with that all finally out of the way, we can actually see how this thing is wired. You can see the unit right here and all the wires connected to it. On the very bottom are the 3 phase wires. Those go to the motor. There's a 4th wire from the motor right here. That's our hall sensors. Just above that is the wiring harness. Now this is just a big loom that goes all the way up to all the components up here. So that's going to be your throttle, your 3-speed, the display, all of that stuff that works out on the handlebars. And then on the top of the controller right here, there is another section, a positive and a negative, which is the battery connection. Now I'm not going to be removing this just yet. I'm going to be unplugging everything that I need for the Fardriver. Also, speaking of the Fardriver, I actually have a few options here. I have the tried and true green box, the ND72450. However, this unit is only rated for 100 amps continuous, 300 amps peak, and while I think this alone could be enough to match the regular RTR, I want more. Plus, this is currently in the Mototech and I don't feel like pulling out that controller, which just leaves these 2 boxes right here. I have an ND72440 and an ND72450. These are both capable of a lot more, 120 amps continuous and 200 amps continuous. That'll produce some serious power, and the obvious choice here is to use the biggest and baddest of the two, the 72450, but maybe not. First thing to consider is the cost of these 2 units, and one thing I will say up front is the cost difference between these 2 is not that big. Depending on where you buy these, you can find them anywhere from $20 to $40 difference, the more expensive one being, of course, the 72450 here. But remember, I am on a very tight budget with this build. I only have $1,000 to spend on anything on this bike, so every dollar counts. The second thing to consider is the size of these 2 units, and it might not look it on camera, but they are actually different sizes in a couple of different ways. So if you put these 2 up against each other, you can see maybe that the 450 here is just a little bit wider, and then if you put them together on this end, you can see that actually the 340 is a little bit taller. So I don't really know exactly which one of these 2 sizes is going to fit in this bike, but rest assured, whichever unit I am putting into this thing, I will be including that in the budget. But now back to seeing whether or not this is actually going to work. So I pulled apart everything that I needed to from the stock wiring harness and plugged that into the Fardrivers, and thankfully that was an easy job because I had a Fardriver wiring harness laying around that actually connects to Electro & Co components. Because previously I had a Fardriver that was wired up to an old Electro & Co ETM 1.0 kit on a Mototech, and thankfully everything there wires up the exact same here. The throttle is the exact same, the 3-speed sensor is the exact same, the key, even the display is the exact same. So I'll show you that wiring obviously later on once it's all said and done, but first I need to actually figure out if this is going to turn on and if it's going to do the auto learn and if anything's going to catch fire. So I got the phone app here for the Fardriver. We're going to turn it on for the first time and see whether or not that works. It gave me the double beep. Nothing smoking. We're off to a good start. Put it in auto learn. That's a good start. Now let's see if it'll do it. Successful. So that should mean It works. Even the speed sensor works right out of the box, and that sounds super powerful. All right. So I guess that first step was actually the easiest. Now for the fun part, which is actually finding out where to mount this Fardriver in the first place. I'm gonna start by taking out all the stock components, the stock controller, the stock wiring harness, everything to do with that, so we have as much room as possible, and look at trying to mount this thing up in relatively the same place. So now with the stock controller out, you can see exactly what I mean. This thing is significantly smaller than either of these two in every single way. And this is the first issue that I'm coming across. So if we take the Fardriver here and slide it into place, it starts to move okay, but then it's getting hung up right here and on the other side. This is the thread for the front shroud bolt. Now I can do one of two things here. I can either cut the threads of the shroud bolts off entirely, or so after a little bit of trimming, I was able to move forward, and yes, I understand that that's probably not advisable. It is just the heat sink though, so I don't think it's gonna be that big of an issue. It's more of a do as I say, not as I do type thing. So having gotten past that hurdle, I was able to place it in there and got things roughly aligned, and it's starting to look like this is gonna be easier of a job than I thought. So as you can see, I have it in place, and I'm going with the ND72450 in this case because this one is just a little bit narrower in this aspect. The 340 is just a little bit thicker, and I think that's going to interfere with the battery section right here, but I have it just set in place with a couple of zip ties in each corner, and it is almost a perfect fit. Look at this. I'm trying to move the controller around, but really I'm just moving the frame, and this is just loosely fitted. All of these zip ties that I have in place aren't even cinched down. There's a lot of wiggle room in these. They're just there to keep it in place, and the clearances are so tight that it really doesn't have anywhere to move. In fact, I thought that the next step was going to be making a frame that it would mount to similar to this. This is the one that comes from the stock bike with the stock controller, and I thought I was going to have to make one similar to this with a cutout that was proportionate to the Fardriver. In fact, I even got a piece of metal sheeting that was the same gauge as this to try and make one myself, but this is such a tight fit that honestly, I think I can roll with this as is. I know it seems janky to go with zip ties with this, but with this tight of a clearance, you don't really need much else. So I think with it roughly in place, the next step here is going to be making all of the connections to the controller. So on this side, you can see there are 5 holes right here for the 3 phase wires and for the negative and positive of the battery. And then on the other side in the center there, we have the wiring harness connection. So we can plug everything into this, move it up here, and make all of the connections here to all of these components and take it from there. So I got all the connections made, all the wires are together, and it's starting to take shape, although there's a few stock components that I'm not going to be using in this case, like the controller mount that I mentioned earlier, but also the controller cover that goes between the controller and the battery. I tried putting that in place, but there's no way with the Fardriver and all the other wires here that is ever going to snap into place. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let's look at the wiring harness here and show you exactly what connects to what if you're putting together a Fardriver with all the accessories and pieces of an Electro & Co kit. So the first piece is the Bluetooth dongle right here. You don't have to mess with that. This is always connected in a Fardriver, so nothing to do here. And these are the Hall sensor wires, and these are exactly how you would expect. There's 6 total, black, red, green, yellow, blue, and white, and they correspond to the exact same colors down here on the motor. So this 2-wired connector right here goes to the keyed ignition. So up here is the black and red that goes to the stock key, and that corresponds down below to an orange, which is the switched power to the Fardriver harness, and a red wire, which is actually just its own wire right here that goes straight to the positive on the battery. Then we have another 6-pin connection right here, and this goes to the throttle and the 3-speed. So on the bottom right here are the wires that go to the Fardriver, and then on each end there's a red, a black, and then a green down here. Those 3 go to your throttle, which corresponds to the exact same colors to the Electro & Co kit, red, black, and then green on the end. Then in between all of that are 3 wires from the Fardriver. There's a blue, a black, and a yellow, which is a little hard to see there, but that corresponds to your 3 speeds, which correlate here to to a blue, a yellow, and a brown. So it's almost perfect. The Fardriver's blue and white does correspond to blue here, but then black goes to yellow, and then yellow down here goes to brown up here. Then finally, we have a 3-pin connection right here, which is the display. And you'd think there'd be more than 3 wires to connect all of that. In fact, there's this other piece right here, which is probably for other components that this doesn't apply, like blinkers, high beam, all that kind of stuff. But really, we just need 3. So the Fardriver right down here has an orange, which is a switched power, black in the middle, and then blue, a light blue, which is the line in. And that corresponds to red, green, and white. Last thing to do really is just slide the battery in and make sure that that clears, get that connected, and we should be good to go. And the battery needed a little bit of persuasion, and I think I need to actually pull it back out and do some much needed cable management around all of this, but as you can see, it fits just fine. There's just enough room between the battery and the controller, and the top battery clamp still fits together just fine. It's not going anywhere. So, should we try it out?
Already it feels so good. It just wants to go. I mean, this feels pretty good as is, and it's basically out of the box with some very, very basic tuning. I mean, it picks up speed really fast. I can feel it hitting like a top speed barrier right there, so I know that there's some room to grow.
Since we don't actually have a working speedo, let's just run one, see what we get. All right, 39 miles an hour. Yes, I understand that is less than the stock speed. This was topped out at 43 previously when I ran it with everything 100% stock, but keep in mind, the tune on this right now is very, very conservative. It is 50 amps line current. That's the same thing that I had in the Fardriver, and that was going about this speed. So I know for a fact that the battery, this stock battery, is capable of more. It's capable of up to 80 amps line current, so we can tune this thing up and see some dramatic increases in speed.
Oh, but it just feels so zippy, even at the small speeds. Especially at little tight corners like this, it's just, oh, it just wants to zip around and, well, pardon the phrase, but it's ready to rip. It just feels so lively. I love it. Woohoo! Woo! I'm loving this. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna have so much fun with this thing once it's ready to rip and it's all tuned. Oh, I can't wait.
In case it's not obvious enough, I'm so happy with the results so far. The concept has been proven. Although truth be told, I kind of knew this going in because Fardrivers, like most other controllers, can be plugged into a variety of motors and sets of controls provided you have the right settings in place and know which wires to connect. But now cost. As you can see, I clearly went with the 72450, which is kind of awesome because in this case it means I have potential for more performance gains later on, and I got this at Hot Packs for $169 even. You can also get this unit at Econic Cycles, and they have a lot more options like finned heat sinks and ones with built-in Bluetooth if they have them in stock, but it's a little bit more expensive over there. That brings our total cost of mods so far to $350.52. Can you believe that? 350 bucks for this so far. Already we've got a pretty killer bike, and the majority of that coming from the latest $170 part. Think about that. That's 170 bucks in this case compared to the official mod kit, which is retailing for $1,000 whenever that becomes available, of course. I'm back. A surprising drop in price from $999 all the way down to $670 because me. And this kit is not just the controller, obviously. It does come with a motor, either a high speed or a high torque motor, which is required in order to run the controller in the first place. For now, mine is still on the stock motor, but that might change pretty soon. But we're definitely not done yet. Now we have to tune this thing and run it to get the full performance figures. And then of course we have to keep adding to it. I still got 650 bucks to spend.
That's right, we got a power mod to make this a hot rod. Don't tell Ellie.